All right, today we are joined by, I think, four-time repeat guest on the No Limits podcast, the body man himself, Eric Bishop. Welcome back to the pod.
I only work for the Body Man and tell his stories. I'm very uninteresting compared to the Body Man, but thank you. I'm glad to be on for the fourth time.
You don't work at the White House? Right outside the Oval Office? I thought you did.
I signed an NDA, so I can't really talk about that. And if I do, there's a good chance the Suburban will pull up in front of your house in a couple minutes, and I'm not responsible for the facility they bring you to, is all I'll say.
All right, well, let's not go that way. And you come up with some pretty creative facilities. One thing about your books that always shocks me is your settings.
Thank you.
I haven't finished Breach of Trust, but congratulations on, are you considering this your second published work? Because you also have a novella in between.
Yeah, so it's my second full novel. So it's my third release, but I have no problem calling it my second book. It's my my sophomore release for the Body Man series, especially.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've called you the grinder on this podcast. Longtime listeners will know how you got to the point that you're at, the success that you found, and
Thank you,
and how everything you've earned, you have worked for and you put in the hours for. For
Yes.
some new listeners who maybe haven't heard your story getting the Body Man to print and what you've been through, tell us a little bit about how you broke onto the scene and your marketing campaign, your self-marketing.
Yeah, glad to. Yeah, I'm an overnight success that took 10 years. So, and I still don't probably consider myself a success, probably because my expectations and standards exceed my sales, I guess I should say. But yeah, so I wrote my first novel in 2014. Like most people, not like most. A lot of people struggle with confidence in this, and I wasn't arrogant in any way, but I thought, man, this is going to start I'm going to start pushing that that boulder up the mountain now, and didn't happen. Rejection for several years. I wrote another book, rejection. Wrote a third book. The third book I didn't even try to query at that point because I was still trying to push the first two, and I was so disgruntled with the publishing industry or the agents, and again, they're doing their job, so I get that part of it, but I thought I had put together something worth publishing. So in the course of just talking to folks, going to Thriller Fest multiple years in a row, I just decided, okay, I need a fresh idea. I'm not getting anywhere with my Troy Evans books, which ironically I've resurrected now, which we can talk about after in my publishing world. But so I wrote The Body Man, and it got written over a long period of time, and then again started finding the whole rejection thing. And I had some pretty well-to-do authors read it ahead of time for me. I had a blurb from Don Bentley. Adam Hamdy was in my corner, so not slouches in the literary world. Most of your listeners probably know them. And what did I find? But agents kept rejecting it. So I was getting pretty frustrated. And then someone said, why don't you look at a smaller publisher? I wasn't at that point against self-publishing, but what I learned, and I can attest to now that I've done it, is I didn't want to go down that path of all the work it would take to self-publish. Because if you're going to self-publish, you have to do it right. If you half-ass it or you don't hire professionals to help you out, you have a very hard chance of making it successful or even profitable. It's a challenge. So, I queried the first small publisher I queried. Man, I had an offer for a 3-book deal within, I think, a week and a half. I've said this on other podcasts too. Ironically, the day I got the offer letter was 4 hours after my divorce papers got finalized. And the only reason I say that is because I had gone through this really dark time and I was starting a new chapter in my life. And as fate, and it's even the back in the acknowledgments, Breach of Trust, I mentioned it. That book came out of what happened during my life at that period. And 4 hours after I got the final papers signed, I had a 3-book deal. And I was like,
that bright spot.
Wow, that's what I needed.
Yeah.
And that kind of was that moment for me. And then Body Man came out, sold really well. You guys that were very supportive, the online community and the reviewers and all that were great. And then, ironically, I submitted Breach of Trust in 2022, and the publisher rejected it. And I went to some big writers that read it before the publisher got it, and I was like, what am I missing here? So I took the publisher's comments directly, the email from the publisher, and gave it back to some of the author friends and said, you hoodwinked me here. Why did you say kind things? The publisher doesn't like this thing. And they're all like, he's wrong. We don't agree. And I was like, well, good, because I don't agree. So I took a little time, and then I just went back to the publisher and said, No, I'm not rewriting it. I'm not going to do whatever you're thinking I need to do. This is the book. If we don't agree on that, this is the book, then let me out of the contract. Which the publisher did. Give him credit for that for sure, and said, well, I'm going to keep publishing The Body Man. And I was like, cool. I'm not asking for The Body Man back. I just want the future books to be able to do with what I choose. And I don't want to go write a book for someone that I don't believe in. Ironically, 6 months later, publisher went out of business. So I got the rights back for The Body Man.
Yeah.
By that point, I had Ransom Daughter in the works to come out in last fall, so the fall of 2023. And at that point, I said, you know what? Let's just put Breach of Trust out summer of 2024. But before that, I'll re-put out The Body Man under my own brand, since the publisher wasn't publishing it anymore. He was out of business. So, so now I'm talking to you in last day of June of 2024, and here we are.
And the amount of hours, and you've posted a lot of it online, so a lot of your followers got to see that journey,
right?
Which I think just makes it all the more enjoyable to read the book, knowing blood, sweat, tears went into it. You know, a lot of books, sometimes, you just take lightly, or you can critique, or podcasters like us would come on. But it's such a different experience feeling like you know the author. And thanks to your social channels, I think so many people who are picking up and promoting your book are not just doing it, one, because it's great, it is, but it's because you've also built a personality and a relationship with the fans. And I think that's really cool. And something we strive to do with the podcast is get to know the people listening. Mm-hmm. And you see some authors out there who don't interact, who don't write back, who don't comment, on the social channels. And I feel like success, especially for someone like you blazing your own path, it has to come with that type of self-marketing campaign and that self-belief, the way you were able to speak up to the publisher.
Absolutely. So, and I won't try to draw. I know I name dropped Bentley and Hamdi already, but one person I give a lot of credit to that was Jack Carr, who I met back in 2018. And as I was going through the process with The Body Man, getting ready to get published, I reached out, and Jack was always very, had his number, and we had some phone calls, and he was always very giving to me and very generous. And I said, I'm not a Navy SEAL. I don't have your pedigree. I can't work that angle, you could say, from a marketing standpoint. So I'm trying to find my footing. And he was just like, be yourself. Be who you are, and also grow a grassroots effort. So that 2021 time period, before The Body Man came out, I just really dug into saying, okay. And I'd already been doing it with social media. I'd already been connecting with people, just being who I was. But I just kind of stepped on the gas a little bit more of, okay, tell about my everyday life. I don't live, anything you see posted online isn't some contrived story or adventure to post online. It's what I'm doing with my life. I just happen to be sharing it. And I also I always want to tell people, like, I had these amazing experiences and still having them with, like, the band Shinedown, thanks to John Guarnieri letting me into that world. I don't ever post that stuff to kind of stick my nose at people and say, hey, look what I'm doing. I post it because it's part of my journey, and I want people to get off their couch and go live their life. Now, I take that with one caveat. If your interest is to just chill on couches and read books or watch Netflix, and you don't feel like you're missing out on life, please continue to do what makes you happy in life. But if there's something inside you that wants more doesn't come by sitting on your couch, resting on your laurels. More comes by busting your tail, whatever that more is. And for me, it's to try to get more books out, to grow my readership. Well, how do I do that? A, I create a really good book, and that can't be sacrificed. And then B, how do I tell people about that book? How do I bring people into my fold? I think that's from being genuine and being authentic. And I hope people do resonate with that.
Yeah. And Jack Carr is almost the perfect example of that. I mean, I've gotten a lot of, this is the Jack Carr emoji, I feel like. The hands together, bowing, the little thank you.
Or you just saw him last week, too, didn't you? Or this past week?
Yeah, for the first time we got to meet an author or guest we've had on the podcast. Man, it was great. Yeah, we saw him at the Philadelphia event. And that was
at the Philly, okay.
Really something. He signed a couple of books for us. He signed some for our patrons, the supporters of the podcast.
Yeah.
He had a line going out the auditorium, and the staff was very clearly, like, concerned they're running behind. Like they wanted to work through this line, and he just took his time with each person and the photos and everything. He was so genuine, but the way he engages with fans.
Brad Meltzer's the same way. Brad Meltzer's on that chart of he will take the time, and as long as I was at one of his events, and I think it was 3 hours of him signing at one of the events I was at. And I mean, he'll sign your baby for you. He'll take photos. when I've gone in the past, and I have a connection with him outside of going to events that we interact, but he has shot birthday videos for my son. He shot birthday videos for one of my friends that's a huge fan that's never met him. And so, and same thing with Jack. You know, Jack and I happened to share a release date this year, which I didn't.
Right.
No one gave me grief and said, "Oh, you chose Jack Carr's release date," because the truth be told, my book was up for pre-order early part of the year, and I chose June 18th, and maybe Meg's date was already June 18th, Meg Gardner, but Jack Carr's date was like May.
Yeah, that date changed. It got pushed back. Yeah,
they pushed it back. So as soon as I saw it pushed back, part of me was like, "Oh, poop! I'm going against the book that's going to sell the most." But I'm not in his league anyway, so that wasn't a problem. So what I did was I texted Jack that day and I said, "Hey, we're sharing a release date. Your publisher pushed it back," and he said, "Yeah." And I said, "So just so the gentleman's agreement, whoever sells more books buys the next dinner." And I got good taste. So I believe with number one ranking, I didn't see my name on the New York Times bestseller list, so I think Jack owes me dinner.
I think so. Yeah,
we can play this recording for him to say, "Hey, didn't you make it? Didn't Eric?" He'll say, "I didn't agree to that."
And I mean, if he's taking requests, maybe some freshly shot venison or something, make him get the bow and arrow out.
I texted him congratulations on the number one and when the book came out, and I didn't hear anything. I heard from him online, but I didn't hear anything text-wise, and I figured his phone was probably stuffed away somewhere for a week, as it should be.
He's also incredibly busy.
Yeah, he texted me, was it this morning? No, yesterday morning he texted me, "Hey, man, sorry, I'm just seeing this book tour, and then he's literally back in Budapest or whatever. He's back overseas shooting again, so I'm like, yeah, that's...
A day for Jack Carr, I think, is 36 hours. That man he needs 8 days a week. I don't know how he does what he does. I even asked if he would come back on the podcast because we're about to review Red Sky Morning.
Right.
That book is incredible. Can't wait to cover it here on the pod. And we want to have him on. David, who works for Simon & Schuster, who helps us out,
the gatekeeper,
was like, he's got the tour. He's going back to Europe. I don't know if we can get him for you this month. We'll try for next month. I'm just like, that man is just so busy, but hopefully we can get a minute of his time soon here.
Well, and the reason to bring him up too is you end up going and looking at the top person in your genre, and there's a good and bad about that. The good about that is you look at someone that's gotten successful, and you need to ask yourself as an author, how did they get to that point? And there's sometimes plenty of things that get them to that point that are out of your control. You can't mimic. You're not going to be a Navy SEAL to be able to have that community behind you or that pedigree for the accuracy of what you write. But what you can learn from him is how he markets and what he does, how he interacts with his fans, what he, I've got it. It's probably back there. I've got this part, I guess. We're not.
You got the video anyways. Setups there. Oh yeah.
I've got like 4 or 5 of these. How many do I have of these? I have 4 cases, plus I have the ones that used to come before these. So he's been kind enough. I met him 6 years ago. Ever since True Believer came out, he's been kind enough to send me a book every year. And that's something that most people can't do, because if you actually look at the numbers of what an author makes, of how many books sell, you realize that top percentage point, those top couple of percent, are at a level that can probably, be in a position to send out thank yous like that. Right. So most people can't
do promo materials. Yeah.
But you can still do something to thank your fans. So what you need to do when you look at a Jack Carr is, okay, how can I be the best version of myself? And the worst thing you can do is compare yourself. If I, on publication day, and I didn't look at my numbers, actually. I was 2 days in before Scott Blackburn, actually, a fellow author, sent me a screenshot. I said, "Hey, dude, your book's like number 14 on Amazon's new release for thrillers." And I was like, "Oh, cool, really? So you didn't look at the things?" Like, no, I'm not looking at any numbers, because guess what? I'm going to be disappointed. So finally yesterday, we're filming this on Sunday. So finally on Saturday, the 29th of June, I finally went to Amazon, and it's real time. Like if you buy a book right now in 5 minutes, or as soon as it ships, ebook is immediate. If it ships, that's considered a sale. So it'll update your Amazon reports. But I finally looked at my sales numbers, and I intentionally didn't. I wasn't going to necessarily look at it even this soon, but I'm also paying to market. So I have to be looking and saying, okay, I don't want to be paying more on a day than what I'm generating. So maybe I have to back my marketing revenue down. So I had to look at it. And, was it as much as I would have dreamed? Of course not. But was it better than plenty of people do? Sure. Again, that comes down to don't compare yourself. If I looked at those numbers and thought, how many books did Jack Carr sell to make the New York Times bestseller list?
You can't compare to that. You really, that's
no,
that's
and you can't compare to that one. But even that, don't set yourself up for failure. Is the moral of the story. Just be the best version of yourself. Work as hard as you can. Write the best books. Don't follow that. It's following the Joneses. Well, my neighbor's got a new car. I wish I had a new car. Your neighbor might not be happy. Screw that. Your neighbor has a new car.
Yeah.
Do the best.
If you were worried. If you were worried just about the numbers and the bottom line and you just wanted to play the game and did what the publisher said, you wouldn't have got breach of trust out there. You don't have to listen to every voice.
Correct.
Every stakeholder, because they're not always right.
Right.
And you do have to go with your gut. And I think this book shows, and The Body Man clearly showed, you doing what you thought was best for your characters, for your universe.
Thank you.
For your marketing is the way to go. And I just think, your work is a testament to that.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that's the beauty of going down the indie route is I'm able to go with my gut. And again, it's not just me reading these books and going, okay, if I write it, it's great and everyone else should read it. I have a trusted group, and some of the group that I have will call me out when I'm falling flat on something. And those are my first people I give it to and say, hey, what do you think? And they can be brutally honest with me, and I'll go in and make changes. If I give it to like 5 or 6 people and one person points something out, but the other 4 people say, well, I liked that part. That was really good. Well, then you have to look at it as it's subjective. So what one person might really like, others might not. So you have to take that, in context. But at the same time, I don't want to ever think that or people have the idea that, well, if I write something, I expect it should be published and it can't be changed. It's nothing like that. If anything, and even like Mark Greeny's talked about, we all have this imposter syndrome when you're an author. When someone says something really good about my book, trust me, it makes me feel good. But there's part of me, it's like, do they mean it? Do they really like it? Are they just saying that? Or did they really read my book? Because my God, it can't be that good, or whatever it might be. So
sure,
because it's hard to get to the point where we put something out and then realize that people are going to judge it. And that's when you just have to say, hey, put your best story out there. If it's well received, it's well received. If it's not, okay, maybe you need to do better next time. But when you believe in it, and when I did with Breach of Trust, I was like, no, I don't agree. I think this is a really solid follow-up. And I think one of the things that I didn't get much of this, but I did get a little kickback before I even got published, is people were kind of like, well, maybe the book should be just really the Body Man. You have so many other ancillary characters in there, and some of them are on par with the appearance, the Body Man, especially in the first book, The Body Man. Eli and Kat are heavily, they're bigger than the Body Man, really. And I did get that from a few early authors. They're like, well, maybe you need to dial back those other characters and make the Body Man stronger. And I'm like, but that misses the core concept. I want this book to be about who is this character. And to do it, I need other characters to help reveal that. And so with Breach of Trust, he did step up. There was more opportunity for the Body Man, but there's new characters in this one, which, makes it a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, wow. It's actually very interesting you say that. I'm roughly 3/4 of the way through the book. And just like the Body Man, a few things stick out to me. And we're going to keep it spoiler free here. So I won't go into specifics, but you do have another character plays a main role, a couple of them, and a female character from another agency that has to be brought in. And I'm kind of enjoying this kind of expansion of the universe to these different people and seeing how they relate to the Body Man. What do they think about that guy sitting in the corner, or the one who always pops up in the doorway, outside the Oval Office, or gets to be in the Situation Room?
Right.
All these situations you put the other characters into where they have to kind of think about the role of a Body Man for the president and protecting the office of the president. It's a really unique way to look at it, because I met the Body Man in the first book, but new characters are now meeting him in the second book, which is making me think or rethink some core beliefs that I had about it. So I think that's a real interesting way to do it, is bring in these other, and there's a little hint of a budding romance I also like to see develop. and some of the characters, their backstory is just very compelling. So I think that's a great move.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I just, I've read my whole life, and I continue to read. I don't read as much now because so much of my time is spent on the business side and then the writing side. So I don't get to read as much my favorite authors, but I've done it over the course of my life that I see how other people have done it. And in some ways, you're always going to emulate that. I'm emulating Tom Clancy in some regards, or Vince Flynn for sure, but I'm trying to put my own spin on it. And my spin is to create an ensemble. And
sure, yeah,
and we talk about it. We can talk about it later in the interview. Where I'm going next with things is I'm not just going to have one series. I'm going to have another series, and those series are going to have, at least to start with, some minor interactions. They're not going to be, the whole groups aren't going to be hanging out, but maybe one of the group is going to be knowing someone from the other group, and that's intentional. That's intentional on my part, from a marketing standpoint, from a story standpoint of the Body Man universe and the Omega Group universe, which are my two things that are out so far. They're happening at the same time, and some stories might end up being backstories or prequel stories down the line, but those are going to have some intersection points at time, mainly because I'm having fun writing it. And I think as the writer, if you're not enjoying doing this, if you're doing this just to chase some money, to chase the New York Times bestseller list or whatever, I think you're missing out on what one of the best parts of writing should be, which is the joy of writing.
Yes.
And to me, it's a joy. And I think if I, as a writer, am enjoying it, there's a higher probability my audience is going to enjoy it as well.
It's true. That's true. And you mentioned some of those names you leaned on because it's so funny. Those are some of the exact authors that I recognized even just in the first few pages of Breach of Trust. We were the Mitch Rapp podcast. We were covering everything Mitch Rapp. Looking forward to the Don Bentley book, Capture or Kill, coming out soon. We'll have you covered with that one, guys, on the Mitch Rapp podcast feed. But Vince Flynn, really, you could see the influence that he's had on you. And one way that comes through is the way you can navigate Washington. Going through Washington, D.C., I feel like is a hallmark so far of a lot of things we've read by you. And it happens here in Breach of Trust, even right in the opening scene. By the way, the restaurant, again, not giving away too much, but the JFK table at Martin's Tavern. Have you been?
I have not done that one. I know about it, and it's on my list. I was going to go with my kids back in March, and my son got sick, so half of our plans got scrapped. That was one of them, to go see the Rumble booth.
But that's so Vince Flynn to throw in and know those little niche things about DC. Yes. And Chris actually worked at their sister restaurant, which was right across the street.
Oh, that's hilarious.
He was back and forth between the two. Yeah, while we were in college, he always was working right there and across the street at both their restaurants. Wow. And when you put that in there, I was like, this guy knows what he's talking about. The research is legit. Same way it was in Body Man.
Yeah, I try to, as much as I can, go to places or work off my memories of places I've gone in the past. And then sometimes it comes down to I've been in that city, but okay, I've only been to these 3 or 4 or 5 restaurants. Well, those don't really fit for a setting. So what else will work? And then, I'll research the place. I looked at pictures at Martin's. Bill, who's the owner in the book, is not the real name of the real owner, but that is a friend of mine, and I love giving cameos to good friends and even readers. I'll probably run a contest here in about a week or so to give away a couple roles for my end of year release this year, because it means more to people. I have to make up names. Why don't I use a real name? So, I love that. When I was just in DC back in March with the kids, again, it got cut short. We didn't get to. We had a private Capitol tour set up.
Reach out when you're in town, because I'm down here.
I will. I might be up there the end of July, actually. So I'll talk with you offline. I might be up there with the kids.
Yeah, for sure.
We're going to probably swing through town for at least a day and a half. But we had a Capitol tour lineup, not private, but with my congressman. That it was. I had to call the aide when I got there to them come get me and start the tour. So it was somewhat private, at least. My son, literally 3 stops from Capitol South, is like, I'm gonna be sick. What do you mean you're gonna be sick? We're on a subway station. So we had to get off the train, grab the station manager, get a bathroom. He's got just stomach going on. Something's going on. Poor kid. He's hurling like crazy. We get back on the train, get to the Capitol. I'm like, well, our tour's in 20 minutes. You think we're gonna make it? As he's throwing up in the bushes, and I'm like, yeah, probably not gonna make this tour. Man. Contact the Capitol aide. Hey, we're not going to make it. Can we reschedule? Well, not today, and ended up scrapping it. Went back to the hotel so he could chill. And but yeah, so all that to say is, if I can get to the places, I try to, and even going to the Lincoln Memorial. So there's a I don't know if you're there yet in the book.
I know it's a tradition though for
it's a tradition for the Body Man, and there's a scene. If you're not at, there's a chapter 47, which is a chapter that, if you're not there yet, there's a pivotal scene for the Body Man, what's going on in his mind at that scene, and he's there with a friend. And the story that happens in that chapter is a real story. It's a friend of mine. He's a great friend of mine. I just saw him at the U.S. Open a couple weeks ago. He got this car. I'll tell the story real quick. So hopefully he won't. I don't think he'll watch this podcast. Will be good. If he sees it, surprise, you're in the book. I gave him the book. He hasn't read it yet. He's like, I'm taking my time. I was like, dude, chapter 47 is for you. So been a friend for 20 years. I'm up at his house in south of Richmond a few years ago, and he gets this blue Corvette. And I was like, what's a 65 Corvette? Gorgeous Corvette. I'm like, what's the deal? Well, the story behind it is his mother passed away, like 20 years ago now plus, and he was really a young man. He was early 20s when his mom passed away from cancer. And when growing up, that was his mom's Corvette. When she passed away, her husband, who was his stepfather, got it. And then when he passed away, his son got it, which was my friend's half sibling, or however that works. So he didn't get his mom's car, obviously. Always wanted it. He didn't think his brother or stepbrother would sell it. Well, his wife on the down low went and bought the car for him and gave it to him for his birthday. And so that is his mom. That's part of his mom. And he got this car. So he tells me the story a couple of years ago when I'm up at the house. Take me for a drive, take my son for a drive. Well, I was then moving on I was stopping in Virginia, but I was going up to Connecticut, spend time with my family like I'll do here in a few weeks. Same trip, basically. And I was writing one day, and I'm like, you know what? I need to honor his story, and I need to share this story because it is a real story. I'll just fictionalize it and make the Body Man his friend, not me. And yeah, they go up to DC. They park the car outside the Lincoln Memorial, and the setting on that's fiction. But the story of how he got that car is 100% a real story. And it's like, many people won't know that unless they either read the book where I do notate it in the acknowledgments or hear the podcast. But man, as a writer, if I can put something in there that's entertaining, yet it's a true story and people are letting me share it, or it's my experience and I can share it, I think that lends authenticity. And I think the readers love to hear stuff, whether they know it's true or not. I think it resonates with them.
That's a Jack Carr thing as well. How many interviews is he on where you hear him say, oh, that's really, I'm going to write that down. I'm going to put that in a book. Right. And I could just imagine Jack Carr has this notebook, however many hundreds of pages long with just ideas and tidbits, just interesting people he's encountered on his journey. Yeah. And he's putting these little things on the back burner to make their way into a fiction story someday, It's a tribute to it. It's a little Easter egg. If you engage with his universe, if you've heard him in that interview, when that thing comes up, you feel like you're a little more connected to it.
Yeah.
It's cool.
It's not meant like I don't put things in there that I can go, oh, I know I can market this later. It's never done with that intent. It's done with a pure intent of, man, if I can infuse like a good example also would be for the Body Man. When I was writing that and I had to have I didn't have to, I chose to have an oil platform for a key pivotal thing.
Dude, that still sticks with me. Yeah, and I was haunted by that oil platform.
And it was real. That stuff's, they really use the oil platforms for crazy stuff. At least everything I've read and talked to people.
If you guys haven't read The Body Man, you don't know what we're talking about. That was just one of the more creative things I've seen an author do and delve into that makes you go, oh, wait, is this fact or fiction? And Brad Thor would call it faction. And I thought that was one of the cooler things you did in that book.
No, thank you. Well, in researching these oil platforms, what I realized is they all have names. It's not just Oil Platform 1 and Oil Platform 2. There's actual names associated with them. So in the sense, in doing that, I was like, well, I have to give it a name. Let me give it something that probably will mean nothing to anybody, but maybe me and a couple people. So my maternal grandmother had passed away in 2010. She had, 25 grandkids, 27 great grandkids. And shockingly, I was her favorite. So I spent the most time with her probably growing up. So my nanny, I loved my nanny. I miss my nanny still to this day. And she died long before I ever wrote completed my first novel, several years before that. But man, a way of honoring her is she used to live, and I drive by it. I'll probably drive by it in a few weeks when I go home. Every time I'm home, I drive by. It's a retirement community. Please, no one go there and scope it out. It's for low income retirement community or housing. 84 Pike Street, New Britain, Connecticut. That's what's her address. And I spent a lot of time with her over the years. So when I got to that point of naming that oil platform, it was like, you know what? I'm going to reverse a little bit. It's going to be Pike 84. Anytime I see one of those chapters with Pike 84, I'll think of my grandmother, I'll think of my nanny, and I'll smile. And if I'm the only one that smiles from it, that's okay. That's what it's there for. I get to honor her in that way. And that's, to me, so many fun parts of writing, but some of it is that you get to do those little things that just, I tell people all the time, and I don't mean it to be cliche-ish the way I say it, but you leave as an author, you leave a little part of your soul in every book, because one day we'll be gone, and it might be sooner than we think. Who knows? Good chance, unless the bomb goes off and the EMP and all the digital stuff is wiped out. There's a good chance our books will, in some form, copies will remain. Well, a piece of you will still be there that your grandkid or your great-grandkid or a stranger can pick up and be like, who is Eric Bishop? If you read my book, you'll get a piece of me, and maybe you'll read part of it and be like, boy, this guy was crazy, or this guy was weird. Well, yeah, I made up some weird stuff. That's part of the job too. So,
what you're saying, I love. There's a short story by Tolkien, Leaf by Niggle.
Okay.
It's probably one of his least well-known works, but
Mm-hmm.
I think it was one of the most important to him, and I think it's one of the things he wrote closest to his death.
Gotcha.
And the whole metaphor is this tree that this civil servant bureaucrat who was led a pretty solitary life. He was always painting this tree, and everything about his life was dedicated towards painting this tree. And ultimately, in the short story, it's a metaphor for him dying and passing on. He gets to live in a world where that tree is front and center. And it's like Tolkien really believed that the things he created, the ideas that he put on paper, existed. Right. There is a realm, and they exist. And you, as the creator, have a special relationship to that. Mm-hmm. So who knows? Even if that EMP comes, Nick Jordan still exists. There's a realm out there of your creativity brought something into the world, into existence. In a different realm of existence. But anyway, it made me think of Tolkien. And it's funny because Jack Carr was on with Joe Rogan. And I don't know if you heard his most recent interview. Joe Rogan went into this like philosophical kind of thing of, I think ideas exist. I think there's like an idea world out there. And it sounded like some Platonic philosophy.
Yes.
And I'm just like, man, if I could give Joe Rogan Leaf by Niggle, this work by Tolkien on his deathbed, I think it's exactly what Joe Rogan was talking to Jack Carr about. This idea world that exists of your creations, and creative people can tap into that. And man, I kind of feel like that's how you relate to your books. You're writing something that has so much more meaning than how many copies will this sell? How can I impress a publisher?
Right, exactly. Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. Yeah, well, we don't know. I mean, I'm a religious person, grown up in faith my whole life, but the bottom line is whatever you put your faith in, if you put your faith in nothing, if you're an atheist and you do not believe there's an afterlife, there's no God, there's no nothing. Well, you're putting your faith in there isn't nothing.
That's a belief. That's a very strong conviction.
That's probably more strong than believing in God, honestly.
That might be more faithful, exactly. Yeah.
That might be. But the bottom line is, no matter what people think, no one knows what happens. Nobody knows. And there's a lot I don't understand. There's a lot I don't even think about because I think it makes my head hurt. But I don't know that time exists the way we view it. And so when we're gone, what we might find out is that time isn't this linear, time's not this linear creation we have. There's not really seconds. There's not really minutes and hours. We might exist forever, or we might not exist forever. I mean, there's so much. So maybe you speak stuff into existence and another dimension is formed, because it's crazy when you see scientific stuff put out there and they talk about like how far out they've looked into these galaxies and like how big it spreads and how many millions or hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of light years things are away. It's like, what do we really know? What do we really know? Crazy. We only know what we see with our eyes, hear with our ears, smell with our nose, our senses. There could be things, that we don't pick up on in this life, or we can't see the way our vision works, that we're missing out. So yeah, maybe I've created a whole, body man universe somewhere that someone's having to live in. And sorry, Junior, you had a rough go with the body man, and Kasha was really a good guy. Actually, Kasha
Sorry,
is
I am
based on a real person, but you just never. When I go, I just want to end up with Merci World. If I can hang out with Merci, she kills people, but sometimes people have to die.
I remember you spoke to us last time about really liking that character. That character meant something special to you, and
yeah, she's just a fun one. She's the one that, out of a lot of the characters from the Body Man world, she's one that I got a lot of correspondence with that said, "Hey, are you going to do something else with her?" And honestly, when I wrote the Body Man, it was a one and done, and that's where reader feedback kind of helps. So after I got the response from that, when I was writing Breach of Trust, I was like, I think I got a spot for her. I got a little mission she could do overseas for the Body Man. So she ended up getting some chapter representation in Breach of Trust, and that then made me realize this girl has a great story. And I figured out her backstory a couple years ago, like why, how does some hot chick become an assassin and kill people? There's got to be something clever there, and not just say, oh, she grew up in this environment or not. No, I wanted to go a little more clever. So I devised it a while ago, and I've tweaked it over the years. That then dived into the idea of, well, maybe she should have her own book. So that's actually one of the ones coming out next year. The plan is, it's called Supreme Justice. I can only give away a little bit because it's not all written, but I can say that in the first chapter, she is killing the husband of a Supreme Court justice.
I was going to say that title screams Supreme Court.
Yeah, it does. Why is she killing the husband of Supreme Court? Well, first of all, you have to get the book to find out. I'll put more spoilers out, but she's been given this contract. She accepts it. She does it. That contract leads to something else, and that something else leads to something that she can't do. And yes, she has limits. She has things that she will not do. Well, we find out what her limits are and what the consequences are when you don't do what your employer says. So that story, I'll dive back in later this year and finish it so I can get it to the editor by spring of next year. And that one's fun. And then that's probably, in my world of craziness, that it's a standalone right now, but I can see how I can work that into a series for her or other people like her, because she does come from a community of other female assassins that I've delved into my head about. So yeah, we'll see how crazy we can expand this universe. But
it's a good elevator pitch. You just sold me on that book, in 20 seconds, and
there we go. I'm looking forward to that one. There'll be one more coming out before that, which and I know I'd come on and talk to you about Ransom Daughters. So I have the next. It's a full length novel this time, not a novella. The novella was fun to do, but I don't think there's as big of a market, and I wasn't sure if there was or not. But it was a good way to kind of get my feeler in on how it worked. Got great feedback. It sold well. So it paid for itself. I didn't lose money on it or anything on the business side, on the publishing side, but it doesn't sell like novels do. Honestly, it doesn't have that impact. So the next book that comes out with the Omega Group is called Babylon Will Rise. I hope to have a cover reveal in July, and pre-orders and all that will rock and roll hopefully in July. And I'm going to try to get that one out. The goal is by the end of the year. And so if anyone knows where Babylon is, they'll know what part of the world it's going to take place.
Sure.
And my teaser at this point is that we have 2 devices out there that we don't want out there, and who's brought in to recover those devices? That would be the Omega Group. So the Omega Group's going to work in the sandbox, and that's a fun one. And the Body Man might have a reason to say hello in that story. I'll say that too. So
okay. Well, you've sold us. You have sold us on both those works.
Okay.
You just, like we said, you're the grinder, and it sounds like you're grinding. Oh, one other question. Before we really wrap things up, on this podcast, we always like to judge a cover by the book. Let me tell you, that Breach of Trust cover, holy moly. Were you really happy seeing that thing in print? Because that is phenomenal artwork.
I loved it. So that was an interesting one. the cover guy I've hired for the last couple books was recommended. Again, the community of authors is amazing. So, and no one that I've met so far says I'm not going to I can't tell you who I use. It's always, hey, this is who I use for covers, or the publishers obviously have their in-house covers and editors, but for smaller publishers or indie folks, there's a lot of sharing that takes place. Hey, I got a great editor. Use this guy. Like I said, I interviewed my editor for my podcast this morning, so he'll come on in several weeks. I'll have my editor on who did Breach of Trust. He edited Ransom Daughter, actually. But I knew what I wanted for the Breach of Trust cover, so I actually did what I tell people don't do. I went into Canva. I created a really unglamorous version of it looks pretty similar to what's there. It's not close, but it's the concept. And sent it off to my cover guy. He came back with a couple variations, but quickly he had it like this. Quickly he had what I was looking for there. And I had him change a little bit the flag. One of the variations had the American flag completely covering, or it also covered Lincoln. I was like, I want Lincoln no flag. I want the flag to wrap around him. And then he gave it to me, and I'm like, cool, but I need you to break the pedestal. I need you to crack the pedestal, because we have a lot of stuff happening in this book, and there's a lot of breaches. There's a lot of conflict happening. So break the pedestal, and then I want the pedestal wrapped in the Russian flag, because Russia plays into this. The sanctum's back, basically. So it took only a handful of days, and he gave me that back, and he's like, we good? And I'm like, dude, we good. We good. I like this. And so, and that's the beauty of kind of going indie. Because if you're with a bigger publisher, you might have a say in it. I'm not saying that they ignore you, but chances are someone's going to design the cover. Maybe you get to say yay or nay, or I don't like that. But there's also a good chance that they're like, this is your cover. And especially for overseas editions or whatever, you don't really have a say. They're going to do it. So with going on your own, if you have a vision for it, you hire the person, you pay them, and they do whatever you want. But that's the key, though, too, that I always try to stress is if you're going indie, get good, because people judge a book by its cover. So if your cover looks amateur, you could have a story that knocks Tom Clancy out of his socks. He blows away what Tom Clancy can possibly write. But if the cover looks like crap, or looks like I created it in Canva, which I've created covers in Canva, and it looks like that, you're not going to sell many copies. Versus you have a great cover and have a horrible story, you might sell a bunch of copies because people go, man, that's a sharp looking cover. But your career will end real quick because your book sucks. The cover is great. So you got to do both. And I'm fortunate that I found someone. And for Babylon Will Rise, I probably won't do it tonight. I'm behind. I'm supposed to get, not a deadline from him, but I told my cover guy I'd give him a write-up. I've decided with Babylon Will Rise, I'm not going to have the concept of this is what I want. I'm going to just tell him what the story's about in 2-3 paragraphs and say, amaze me. Yeah. And I'll know quickly, because he'll send me 4 or 5 very different variations, and I'll be like, I like number 3, and then I might go, can you add in this? Can you tweak it a little bit? But he's so good.
It's got to relate to the book and the plot. And that's why this is a 5 out of 5. I mean, we do a 5-point scale for covers, and Chris and I could debate them. Sometimes most of our episode or the enjoyable content is our debate about the covers. This one's perfect. I have no doubt he would give it a 5 out of 5. And even more importantly, it relates so clearly to the book. Like you said, the Lincoln Memorial plays a role. The American, the Russian flag, the breach, the broken stone.
Right. Thank you.
It's got to relate to the book. And sometimes we see these covers that have nothing to do with the book, and we slam them. We have no tolerance for that. But your covers so far have been knockout.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying
Ransom
that.
Daughter had the Eiffel Tower, I remember.
Yeah. Too. Todd Wilkins actually did the did that cover design for me from Best Thriller Books. So and that was one that I kind of knew what I wanted, and I gave him the vision, and he just, and then he gave me one version back, and I'm like, yeah, we need a guy. So he gave me a guy. He's like, hey, he's got to have a gun. He had a gun. Like, he's holding the gun wrong. We need to get rid of the gun. We need to find this one. And so we just messed with the images and I've got such a good back and forth with Todd that I was able to kind of narrow down. But I loved, and I probably, it's back there. It's back behind. I know we're not doing the audio on this, or just audio, but it's back behind me. And I might give that to my cover guy at some point and say, well, this is the world we kind of created for the covers, but they can be different because it's a novella. But once he gets that cover for Babylon Will Rise, I plan on doing other books down the line. I want to keep with a kind of a certain theme, especially with the fonts and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So now I want it to look different from the Bodyman books. I want it to be set aside like you have. You got a different series. Your cover needs to have a little bit different of a concept,
right?
So,
but you got to have the through line in a series. The covers need to have a through line. Like they really have to. You have to be able to tell it's kind of in the same vein, in the same series, if it's
absolutely
in the same series.
Yeah. So many of the authors and the publishing houses do a really good job at that. Where they've got these designers that they know they're going to have the next book, and so they make these subtle changes. But there's pieces there that kind of tie them all together. And again, not to knock the indie world, because I'm really enjoying being in it, but I think that's the biggest fail you see in the indie world is people don't, and there's a lot of reasons for it. You got to have the resources, and plenty of people can't afford to hire a professional cover guy. I totally get that. I would have been in that position for years of my life as well. Unfortunately, I can get a cover guy now, but I'm also at the same time, yes, I can afford a cover person, but I'm not going to go spend 3 times now that I found someone I'm comfortable with and it's a good, reasonable rate. Why would I go spend more? I got a good cover person. So you need to be careful how you spend it, but spending it on a good cover, it's just like spending it on a good editor it's important. And then the other thing too, and I've said this on my podcast a bunch and I've said it on other ones, is I think the most important thing, and especially for indie writers, is you got to stay in your lane. So if you're going out and you're going to self-publish, I'm proof, and there's lots of other people proof that there's nothing wrong with doing that. And I'm not saying I'm never going to go traditional either, but there's nothing wrong with going the indie route, but make sure you do what you should be doing. So if you're the writer, write. Should you be also doing the cover and the editing and the marketing and all that? I would say generally no. Can you?
Or balance your time at least. Make writing be the priority.
Yes, correct.
It's got to be the priority.
Yeah, absolutely has to. Yes. So no, it's been great, and it's a little ambitious for the next. So we're looking at 3 books because I didn't even mention that. We'll also the plan is to have a second book out the end of next year, 2025.
And what about the follow up to Breach of Trust? Are we going to complete the Bodyman kind of trilogy here?
Of course, absolutely.
Good.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Because I haven't heard you talk about that yet.
Probably at the rate we're going, though, that's going to have to be a 2026 release. I hate to tease the fans for so long, but like I said, you should see the Bodyman helping out with Merci a little bit in my 2025 release, and then at the end of 2025, I'm kind of doing a summer and end of the year release in 2024, and I'm gonna try it if I can pull it together. Between full-time job and kids and travel and all the crazy fun stuff I do in life.
The grinder. That's why you're the grinder.
That's how you make it in this business. And that's how you get books out, is to put your nose down and work. And I fail at that a lot. So trust me, I'm not the epitome of what you should do. I'm so behind right now in my end of the year release. It's not funny. So I'm going to...
Jack Carr, Brad Thor, Vince Flynn, all of them have been, Don Bentley, have all been behind deadline this year. This year, all 3 of those books have been pushed back a month or so.
Been pushed back,
so I feel like the publishing industry right now is just deadlines. I don't know. They don't mean anything because it's just the work has to. And that's the thing we've talked about on the pod is so many of these series and these traditional publishing routes got to the point of it's a cash cow. So every year, this month, we need the book.
Right.
And that doesn't always line up with how creativity works and what a creative person needs.
Correct.
And I think we've seen in a lot of thriller series, the consequences of that are impacting the quality of the books. And it's not a trend I'm always happy with. And too much of it has become corporate. And we need deadline this month. We publish this month. This is the date. And not every one of these books or stories needs an annual installment.
Right.
But it makes the money,
It makes the money. So... And that's why I'm in a fortunate position where I have a full-time job. I love writing. I get to do it with some of my free time. And then I can decide, I know if I push a book out and I say, well, okay, here's the Breach of Trust is out. Hey, I'll put the 3rd version out in 2030. Okay, that's probably not going to work very well. I'm going to lose a lot of fans that are going to forget who I am. So it needs to be reasonable, but does it have to be every year? Well, I think with what I'm going to come out with next year, that will kind of satiate people, give them a different series even to start, and then get back on track. And the Bodyman one, it's not that I want to, but I've got these other ones lined up that have kind of been in the queue for a while. and I want them to get their attention. And at the end of what I was going to say is the end of 2025 release is actually a backstory, and I don't have a title yet for it. I had a title, but I don't like it. It's a title from a while ago that I'm just not. It's just changed. I've changed the story around, but it's Troy Evans' backstory. So long before Troy was part of the Omega Group, he was following the same path as his father. He was going to go to college and he was going to graduate and he was going to join the FBI. His dad was a special agent in charge of an office out west. He's going to get an office. He's going to follow dad's footsteps. And then 9/11 happens. All I'll say is Building 7 falls, and there's stuff with Building 7 that completely alter the path of Troy Evans. And it's a story it's a fun backstory on Troy. So instead of joining the FBI, we see the fruit of it now, and what's coming out this year and what came out last year with Ransom Daughter is he's leading an elite group of soldiers. Well, he wasn't supposed to do that. He was supposed to join the FBI. So how did that get jacked up? That's the end of 2025 release. So
there he is with the elevator pitch again. So
keep track of these so I can remember them, so I can just play them back on the next podcasts.
Well, dude, it's been great catching up, hearing about everything going on in the world of Eric Bishop, all the projects to come. And I'm glad you are able to find your creative path and really take the bull by the horns and run full steam ahead and keep the brand on track, because we love what you're putting out there, and keep doing what you do. And like Jack told you, keep being yourself, and that's what's going to sell. And that's the best part of it all. So.
Well, thank you. And you guys have really, and the podcast has really been instrumental in just helping share the story of the novels of The Body Man and Ransom Daughter and now Breach of Trust. And very grateful for the opportunity to talk about it and just get the positive feedback. Because again, you kind of write in this chamber sometimes of, right. Is this really getting received? And you guys are kind of like that elite group of, the thriller world, Thor and Finn and Flynn and Clancy and Bentley and Mills and all these guys. And so to have your guys' seal of approval does mean a lot. The other thing I want to say real too quick about the industry is what you mentioned of, kind of maybe the growing pains or what's happening with it. Well, Kyle Mills jumped ship. Kyle's going to a completely new entity, which I'm starting to look at because I'm like, well, if Kyle's looking there, what don't I know about maybe what's happening with the publishing industry? And I'm hearing lots of rumors, kind of whispers and behind the scenes of there's lots of stuff happening. And I'm probably the last one hearing some of it, but it's just like, and I think the publishing industry is having to catch up to the fact of, the overhead costs that you have from these big monstrosity corporations versus, you can put something out on your own and you can hire a good cover person, a good editor, you can get some distribution. Maybe you're not in every brick and mortar store, but you can set these things up and put great stories out. And the one thing I'll end with too, I've got a writing friend that reached out to me recently, and I'm sure it's a good book. I haven't read it, but I read his previous book and it was fabulous. He's been out, got an agent, legit agent. I know who his agent is. He has been out on sub. So it's been out to editors at publishing houses for like 200 and something days and still not got picked up. And again, I haven't read it, so can't know, but I know his quality of writing. And if that book gets signed Monday morning, so we're filming this on a Sunday night, if that gets signed Monday morning, that book ain't coming out for like a year and a half, 2 years.
Right.
So, and it's already been out for almost a year on trying to get it. So you're talking about something that was written 4 years, in a 4 years later, it comes out.
And things get dated now with tech and tactics and geopolitics and whatnot.
That's not sustainable. Then
you're going back to the drawing board, which then changes your creativity because you might not be in the same creative mindset to make those changes 4 years after when the idea came about.
Yeah.
With Kyle, that crank him out a book a year, I think it took a toll on him after all the years. And I think, unfortunately, it maybe stifled some personal things he wanted to do, whether it's his time in Spain or his Fade character, a book he wrote years before, over a decade before, and wanting to go back to that second one. But when you're in the corporate machine, like, how do you make time for your own creative endeavors and work on the side? And I think he felt like the time was right. And so, it was like clean break, time is right. And it seems he's enjoying himself in Spain. And I can't wait for Fade 2. That was a great character, great book. And you could just tell he had the personal drive and passion to do it. Yeah. And it was the annual contracts that were holding him back from the publishing houses from doing it. And so I'm glad to see, authors pursuing their passions. And
because he's going to end up, his last one came out September? His last rap novel was last September or October?
Yeah. 23.
September.
Usually September, yeah.
I think so, yeah. And so his next one, the next Fade story isn't coming out until I believe summer of next year. So you're looking at almost a 2-year gap. You need to be on your own
process, and you need to do what you need to do to tell the best story you can, and not just listen to the powers that be tell you we need it by this deadline because of money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Eric, thanks for coming on. Always a blast. And I think I was right, 4-time appearance. So we might have to get you for a 5th down the road.
I would be honored. And if anyone wants to check out Breach of Trust, either my website, ericpbishop.com, go to Amazon, type in Breach of Trust and Eric Bishop, and it's going to maybe be the top thing, I hope. I know the Body Man pops up on the top normally.
Sure.
That's the cool thing, too. Just looking at the numbers yesterday, it's neat to see now that, in the past, I know I had The Ransom Daughter out, but having a sequel out now, all of a sudden, the amount of ebooks I've sold for the Body Man this last month, I was like, cool. Oh, that's awesome. So that's a nice little plus. I hope that continues every month. Probably won't, but hey, we'll be grateful for what it did this month and keep on, keep the machine running and just keep the creativity going, and love hearing the feedbacks. And then also, if you do get the book, please go out there, leave me an Amazon rating or a review, and those make a difference. I think I looked this morning and I'm somewhere in the 40 range, not even 2 weeks out. For indie, that's really solid. It's not Jack's 900, but that's okay. He's sold a couple more tens of thousands of copies than me, and that's good. Hey, I don't have 0, so I'm making my progress.
There you go. You're plus 40.
Absolutely.
All right, man. Keep grinding. Good to talk to you. Thanks for coming on.
Always good. Thanks for having me.